Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Molecular Simulation to Drive Materials Innovation. We are very happy to have everyone in here join us today. My name is Basma, a solution consultant at LaunchTech. We are the official and only partner of BIOVIA in the Middle East, and I'll be your host for today's enlightening session on computational chemistry and material science. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest to this session, Dr. Johan Carlson. He is a senior industry process scientist and fellow of the Science Council at the BIOVIA brand of Dassault Systems. His contribution to the computational materials field is very vast, and throughout his career, he has published many scientific articles which have received over 10,000 of citations. But before I hand over to Dr. Johan, I'd like to remind everyone that on the right of your screen, you have the GoToWebinar panel, where you can ask your questions throughout the webinar. It's very important since we will answer it at the end of this session in a Q&A session, and it will be great to open meaningful discussions. Also, you can download the three handouts that are in the handout session to know more about the topic. Now I give the floor to Dr. Johan to start this insightful session.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. And today we're going to speak about how molecular simulations can help drive materials innovation. So the first question is, of course, what drives product innovation in a broader sense? And since we are all aware that today new products are to a very large extent driven by new materials. So that may be in computers and handheld electronics, it may be for cars and automotive, it may be for airplanes. They have really a common denominator that in all these developments, we like to increase the material performance, so materials development, but also decrease the aging and deterioration. And this I call then materials forensic, understanding why materials age, why they are losing their performance over time of usage. So the question here is, how can molecular simulations help in these questions? How can it help drive materials innovation? Yes. So at Dassault Systems, we are working on creating connections between the electrons, the very elementary building blocks of materials, up to the actual products. And this has been the classical way that we start from the very small and we are building upwards to the actual macroscopic product. What we are now trying to make is really a connection between products and the material atomistic world, so that we can start already from the specification and the requirements from the product, look for materials, and then look and simulate how that influences the performance of the product. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm very curious here about your background. So are you already using simulations in your research? And then are you doing on the atomistic level, for instance, with quantum mechanics, molecular dynamics, or are you more working on the continuum level, the macroscopic scale with, for instance, finite element simulations? So there is a poll where you can enter your answers to this question.
It seems that around 40% uses molecular dynamics, 33% use quantum mechanics, and we have a 13% who uses finite element simulation. So from different users.
Okay, thanks a lot. It's very interesting to hear what is your background and getting to know you a little bit better. So that's interesting that we basically have a distribution among these different methods. So I will then tell you a little bit more about what Dassault Systèmes is offering here. So from the research solutions, we are providing then 3 types of solutions. So we have the molecular modeling, which will be the major part of this talk. We're also providing solutions for the lab to take care of the data generated in the lab, like electronic lab notebooks, but also taking care of the inventory and providing storage for your data and operating procedures. And then once we have generated very valuable data, we also have solutions to analyze the data in terms of data modeling and data simulations. We are providing all these 3 parts for the scientific work. So I will first start with molecular modeling. And for material science, we are providing 2 different tools. So Material Studio is a general purpose material science simulation tool. So here you can build atomistic models of molecules, crystals, nanoparticles, polymers, and you can also make interfaces between, for instance, crystals and polymers, liquids. You can make complex models, for instance, of batteries, battery cells. You can investigate how catalysts and chemical reactions. Very complementary to Material Studio, we also have COSMOtherm, which is for solvation chemistry, and the focus here is on chemistry in the liquid state. So, for instance, solubility of liquids, solids, and gases in solvents. It also provides possibilities to investigate phase behavior like liquid-liquid, liquid-vapor, and liquid-solid equilibria, micelle and membrane partitioning. So I will give you examples now how you can use these 2 software. So we start with COSMOtherm, and a pretty typical situation in chemical engineering. So if we want to synthesize cyclohexane, which is a standard chemical which is used in very many fields, we can do it from hydrogenation of benzene to form cyclohexane. And it's usually done in this way that we start with a feed, benzene plus hydrogen. It goes into a reactor, it reacts, but the reaction is not complete, and we usually have remaining benzene with the produced cyclohexane. This makes a problem because we want, of course, to have a perfect production and only produce cyclohexane. The problem here is that it's very difficult to distill, to separate cyclohexane from benzene, which is standard because they have the same boiling point. So another approach is then using so-called liquid-liquid extraction, where you use a solvent, which then only one of the components, in this case it would be benzene, would be dissolved in the solvent, and you can take that away and you have the cyclohexane. And the challenge is then, of course, finding this perfect solvent that's able to dissolve benzene. So the question is, can we use simulations, in particular COSMOtherm, to predict the optimal solvent for liquid-liquid extraction? The procedure, how you work with COSMO, the solvation chemistry tools, is that we start with the quantum chemical calculation to generate the charge distribution around the molecule. It's called the COSMO surface, where COSMO is an acronym for conductor-like screening model. And this COSMO surface we can then analyze via statistical mechanics to generate a histogram, which is called COSMO profile. These COSMO profiles we can store in a database. There is a database which can be purchased together with the COSMOtherm. It's called COSMObase. And once we have all the molecules of interest, the COSMO profiles, then we can start to perform the COSMotherm calculation using the statistical thermodynamics in the COSMO RS, where R is an acronym for realistic solvent method. So how would we then address this problem of liquid-liquid extraction of benzene? Well, we can use the COSMotherm then to calculate the activity coefficients for benzene and cyclohexane in a set of test or candidate solvents. So here we see the COSMO surface for a benzene molecule, and we can see that it has a slightly polarized structure. So the hydrogen atoms are slightly positively charged and the carbon atoms are slightly negatively charged. So the carbon atom extracted a little bit of electron density from the hydrogens. So we're using this information then to calculate the activity coefficients. And then from the activity coefficients, we can derive the selectivity, the capacity, and the performance index. So the performance index is the product of selectivity and capacity. And this is then a very powerful index to estimate how useful a solvent is for doing this liquid-liquid extraction. So we start with selectivity. We can see here that we have the dashed line is then the profile for benzene. The full line is for cyclohexane. So we see that cyclohexane is less polar than benzene. And we can see that solvents which have a good selectivity for benzene here, we see that they have then a stronger polarity and also a slight asymmetry, so that we can have a stronger or a better affinity for benzene. If we take this further and we also take then the index, which is the product of the capacity and selectivity, we see that the picture changes slightly. So here we have then the very good solvents have here an isometric profile. So it has a strong peak which is slightly negative, which is then from the hydrogen side of benzene, and then it has also a slightly positive here, which would be compatible with the benzene. So we can understand the behavior also if we are looking into this sigma profile. So here we have then identified a set of good candidates, and we can then perform experiments to compare, and we can see here that the selectivity in the experiments are the full symbols here, and the open ones are the simulation. So we can see that we are having a quite good tendency and agreement here, showing that these candidate solvents are also confirmed by experiment as good candidates for liquid-liquid extraction for this reaction. So this is then an interesting, good example of how you can use COSMO to screen and to find suitable solvents. So I just like to finish this section about COSMotherm by highlighting some new features in the most recent release. So there are a few new functionality with that for transport properties. So liquid thermal conductivity and diffusion and viscosity can now be predicted with COSMotherm. There are also enhancements in the interface, so that you can now do ternary phase diagram for liquid-liquid extraction. So you can see how you with also mixtures of solvents. how they behave. And there's also temper dependence for the mixturing and equation of state. So this closes then the part on COSMoTherm, and I will then go over to Material Studio. So Material Studio has a wide variety of solvers or methods for computation. So you start with generating your atomistic molecular structures. For instance, molecules, molecular crystals, nanoparticles, and that you can use then as starting point for calculating quantum mechanical calculation. For instance, gives you a detailed description of the electron, for instance, for chemical reactions, electronic properties. You can also calculate the reaction kinetics for chemical reactions, so not just the reaction barrier, but also the full rates. You can perform molecular dynamics to extract dynamical properties like diffusion, viscosity. You can also run coarse-grained simulations where you can then assess larger systems, for instance, for polymers, behavior of polymer mixtures. There is also Monte Carlo methods, which are alternative to molecular dynamics, for instance, investigating the adsorption of molecules on surfaces or in porous structures like zeolites, which will be the first example. There is also capabilities to investigate crystallization, crystal structure, and the crystal habitus of molecular crystals. There's also data-driven methods like QSPR, quantitative structure property relationships. So these are all available in Material Studio. And then once you have performed calculation, you can analyze the results in 2D graphs and also 3D fields. So I will now show a few examples. I will start with zeolites. So they are very much used, as you're certainly aware, as catalysts for different chemical reactions. And the very useful thing with zeolites is that you can optimize the pore structure to make them very selective for various reactions. So for instance, a zeolite with an 8-ring pore structure, that's quite small. That means that it is selective and useful for small molecule reactions. 10-ring pores are useful in refining applications, aromatic transformations, and then with a 12-ring pores is useful for converting larger organic molecules. So we see here that the pore size is a really important parameter and for the where they find their applications. So up to now, it has been mainly even number rings. So a question is, can we also derive zeolites with an odd number ring structure? That means that they would probably have new applications compared to the zeolites with even number of atoms in the ring that's known to up to now. So in this example, the researcher has been playing around with different construction or building blocks with odd number of atoms and try to generate then new structures, how they could come together to form a zeolite. So they were starting using then simulations to generate candidate structures and then selected the best ones for synthesis. And then calculated also the efficiency or to absorb and gases and the conversion. So This we can do with Material Studio with the module which is called sorption. So this is a Monte Carlo based method, which is putting candidate molecules into the zeolite structure and calculate properties like adsorption energy. Can be used then for calculating isotherms, binding sites, and distribution of molecules. So this is a very useful tool to screen and to investigate zeolites. So in this particular investigation, they were able to generate new ring structures with a unique 11-ring structure or channels. So they did it both with simulations, and they managed to synthesize it and analyze it with a transmission electron microscope and identify these structures. They also performed calculations to investigate the absorption into these pore structures, and they found out that the conversion rate, for instance, for a hydrocarbon like decane, was actually comparable or even better compared to a commercial standard zeolite, the ZSM5. So here we can see how the simulation can be a very useful playground to create new candidate structures and then guide the way to synthesize. And then also, before you even synthesize it, you can also simulate the performance in terms of absorption and catalytic activity. So the value here is that with this combined methodology with simulations guiding the experiments, they generated a new ring structure, and they even made a patent out of this structure based on the combined approach. So the next example is then from photocatalysis. And in photocatalysis, particularly here for generating hydrogen and oxygen from water, so water splitting, there are a few material properties which are vital. So the process is that the water gets electron. First, the material is absorbing photons, so light, where electrons are excited from the valence band to the conduction band. These electrons are then reactive, and they may react with protons forming hydrogen gas. It means that we need to have a band gap which is within the optical range if we want to use visible light. The generation point, or the hydrogen potential, needs to be within the band gap, and as well as also the water splitting potential. So we see here that we can formulate some criteria. So can we predict it? Yes, we need to formulate requirements for a photocatalyst. So if we want to work with water, it of course needs to be stable in contact with water. We need to have a band gap that's larger than the half of the dissociation energy. So the dissociation energy is 2.46 electron volts. It means that it needs to be bigger than 1.23. We have here the different reactions. So the hydrogen reduction, which is that the protons are picking up electrons to form the hydrogen gas. We can calculate the energy for that, and we can have calculate the the neutral hydrogen electrode. So we can determine the chemical potential for the electron where it needs to be. And the same goes with the water oxidation, where the water needs to pick up 4 holes to generate the protons and oxygen gas. So we can calculate also this and determine what is the potential for the oxygen. So, and the band gap should be in the visible range. Then the valence and conduction band should have different character to prevent recombination. So we need to have sufficient lifetime of the excited electron. And these 2 levels that we just calculated needs to be located in the band gap, as I indicated in the previous slide. And of course, what we here want to have is an environmentally friendly material. So in this investigation, we were looking at carbon nitrides. So they are metal-free materials, so they are environmentally friendly. They're stable in contact with water, and they are synthesized via starting from carbon nitride molecules, condensing them to a sheet-like structure. In experiments, they have determined the band gaps as function of the condensation level, so along this condensation path, and it indicates that the band gap is decreasing depending on the synthesis temperature, so that, which is also indicating that the longer and the higher temperature, the more condensed the material is. We can also see this in simulations, that the more the condensed, so for the Miller molecule, the HOMO-LUMO gap is quite large outside of the band gap. As we are condensing further into this so-called melon or the sheet-like structure, we see that the band gap decreases as the electrons in the conduction band becomes more and more delocalized. So we can identify this trend of basically we could optimize the band gap here by letting this condensation path to the appropriate level. So we see here that these materials have an appropriate band gap for photocatalysis. Then we investigate what is the structure and the electronic structure. We can look at the valence band and conduction band, and we can identify that they have a different character, which means that they should have a relatively long lifetime in the excited state. So charge separation between the electron and holes. We can then also calculate the absolute value of the 2 chemical reactions, the water reduction and the hydrogen formation. From this, we can see that these 2 levels are located in the band gap. So that's the photo excitation, and the photoelectron is able to participate in the reaction. So now we can check these requirements that we were formulating at the start, and we can see that we are this material carbon nitride do fulfill all the requirements that we can put on a photocatalyst. So it means that we now can make a test, an experimental verification, and that shows that we have a continuous production of hydrogen gas from water. So it confirms then that what we did with the theoretical prediction where we identified that the criteria for a photocatalyst was met by these materials is also confirmed by the experiments. So we see that this screening procedure is able to identify a material from just in silico procedures if they are a suitable candidate or not for a photocatalytic activity. So the third example I'm going to discuss here from Materials Studio is battery materials, which is at the moment a very active field of research. You're certainly aware that it is a very strong interest in generating batteries with better performance, so we can, particularly for electrical vehicles, get a longer drive on a single charging. A battery cell is a very complex electrochemical system, so we can here help by really investigating individual part of the battery cell. So we have the anode side, which is typically a graphite material, which is getting intercalated during charging. We have the cathode material, which is commonly a lithium metal oxide, and it may go through various changes, structural changes during charging and discharging procedure. So we can investigate here how the when we are discharging, we are removing lithiums, and we can see then what happens to the structure if there are structural changes. And we can also calculate the open cell voltage for this material. And by that, we can play around with different lithium metal oxide formulations. So first, the first material proposed for lithium batteries was lithium cobalt oxide. It turns out that it's both toxic and it's not so frequently available. So we may test alloying or changing this cobalt for other materials or metals like nickel, aluminium. So today, a typical cathode material is a mixture of nickel, cobalt, and aluminium. But it's really a goal to remove the cobalt completely. And we can do that, we can try that out in the computer. Another very important part of the battery cell is the electrolyte. And that is usually formed by mixing a solvent, for instance, organic solvents, with a lithium-containing salt, like lithium phosphide fluoride. And you may then also add additives to this. We can calculate the lithium diffusion and the lithium conductivity in such an electrolyte, so we can play around with the composition and formulation of this electrolyte to optimize the conductivity. And what is really sought for and by manufacturers of cells and also electrical vehicle manufacturers, understanding what is happening at the anode, the contact between the anode and the electrolyte, because there is a layer building up which is called the solid electrolyte interface layer, which is preventing the anode to be attacked by chemical reactions. And I will show you here how we can address this growth of the solid electrolyte layer. So we need to first investigate what is the process, the individual reaction steps in the composition of the electrolyte. So we need to make a reaction list like this. Once we have that, we can perform molecular dynamics simulation where we also include kinetical reactivity steps. So that means we're running a short period of molecular dynamics. We are stopping and we are investigating if any chemical reaction might happen in a kinetic Monte Carlo sense. So we're calculating probability for chemical reactions. If there is a reaction happening, we are changing the state of those molecules involved. and then running another molecular dynamics to progress the time in the system. And in this way, we can propagate and we can simulate how the processes at the anode in the electrolyte is leading to the growth of the SiE layer. So this means that we can really understand on an atomistic scale the procedure and the processes leading to the solid electrolyte interface growth. This is a very small and material focused view. We can also connect this with other simulation tools like the finite element solver, which is called Abacus, or the one-dimensional implementation of the Newman model, which is called the Dimolar battery library. These are provided by two other brands in Dassault Systèmes, which are called CATIA and Simulia. So we can use these different tools to make really a connection with material properties over simulations then of three-dimensional Newman model and one-dimensional system level simulations to up to cells, packs, and electrovehicles. And one way of doing that is that in the Newman model, there are a number of material properties. These can be determined then from atomistic simulations. So for instance, here we have an example where we did molecular dynamic simulations for electrolyte as function of the salt concentration and temperature variation to derive this curve, the conductivity, as function of lithium concentration. This information could then be ported up to the Dimolar battery library to perform simulations then of a capacity voltage curves at different temperatures to see how that behaves a cell, which shows good agreement with experimental data. So that were a few examples what you can do with Material Studio. I will now just shortly say what is new in Material Studio for the latest release. So for atomistic classical simulations, we have now since 1 or 2 releases support for GPU calculations with our molecular dynamics. And we also have improved the force field Compass 3. For our coarse graining tools, we have since also 1 or 2 releases, we have implemented the new version of the Martini force field, which is a general force field for coarse grained simulations. This analysis tools now also support structure factor from density fields and pressure analysis. For metal alloys, we are providing a new protocol to calculate phase field, the so-called continuous cooling transformation or CCT diagrams. We are also now providing a connection between Material Studio, Pipeline Pilot, and TurboMold via a Pipeline Pilot protocol and collection for TurboMold, so that you can create molecular structures in Material Studio and you can run TurboMold then via protocols. So this requires that you also have a license for TurboMold. For the quantum mechanical solvers, there are a number of new capabilities like a protocol to calculate SPX spectra. The calculation of vibrational properties has now been extended, so you can also use it for magnetic systems. There are new Slater-Koster libraries for the DFTB, the density functional base tight binding module. And there's also a possibility to use the COSMO implicit solvation model also with the DFTB plus. And hybrid exchange correlation function has now been implemented into one-tap module. And we are also able to connect Material Studio via a power by to cloud computing, which is probably more important for commercial customers, as academic customers usually have access to large computing facilities. So finally, I will just give a very short view on what we can do with data science and data modeling. So we have another tool which is called Pipeline Pilot, which is able to read general purpose data like CSV and Excel, but also connect to databases and analyze this through a modular or computing language where you have components which are able to deal with data, read data, analyze, and even perform calculation and execute code. And then you can use this also to make reports, which may be then published on web dashboards or written back to databases. So here is how it looks like. So we have the blue components are the data analysis tools. So here you can read in a data set. In this case, it's a data set for battery cell cycling. You can split this data. You can make different types of analysis. So here we have one is analyzing a single cycle. We have another pipeline here, which is doing in a hysteresis curve. And then we have a third pipeline, which is analyzing how the decay or the capacity is fading over multiple charging cycles. The green components here is then doing the reporting and displaying of the results. So this is how it can be presented then. So we have the analysis of a single cycle, we have the hysteresis analysis, and we have the capacity fade analysis. And this can then be displayed in different types of dashboards. You can also use Pipeline Pilot to as a workflow engine for simulations. So for instance, if you want to calculate the glass transition in polymers, you need to go through a number of simulation steps like this. So that you need to build an amorphous cell, you need to equilibrate the structure and run production molecular dynamics and do a curve fit. So we can implement this in a Pipeline Pilot protocol like this. And now do this whole procedure in a single program. And an example of it results look like this. Creating a polymer melt, running this molecular dynamics simulation at different temperatures. And then we can do the analysis to look at the thermal expansion at different sides of this transition. And we can then identify the transition as the crossing point between these two lines. So this would then be the predicted glass transition temperature. So I would also be curious to hear what kind of analysis tools you are using in your research. So are you using Excel? Are you using software packages which are delivered with your lab instrument? Are you using commercial data analysis tools, or are you more using open source programming tools like Python libraries?
It seems that 60% are using Excel, and few 11% are using other softwares. That's our commercial, our open source, and other software packages.
Okay, I see that Excel still has a very large user base. Yeah, I mean, it's a general purpose data analysis tool for sure, but we can make it more efficient. So I then come to the point of a summary here. So I hope I have shown you that material simulations can really drive materials innovation. For instance, for liquid-liquid separation, finding new zeolites, screening photocatalyst materials, simulating the growth of the solid electrolyte interface layer, and also calculating glass transition temperature for polymers. So by that, I would like to give Best my chance to present LaunchTech.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation, Dr. Johan. We have a few questions. However, before jumping to the Q&A session, I will present LaunchTech and few offers that we have going on. I will share my screen. Please confirm if it's shared.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. A brief introduction about LaunchTech. We are an engineering and science company based in Abu Dhabi in United Arab Emirates. We specialize in different fields from computer-aided design, CAE, but one of our fields is that we specialize in computational material science. And due to our strong partnership with Dassault Systems, we are the only and official partner of and reseller of BIOVIA in the whole Middle East. With this partnership, our goal is to spread and democratize the use of the software in the region, especially with the current challenges. Many research is going on to find new fuels, to replace fossil fuels with more sustainable fuels. As you said, battery materials is also an important research topic. New water treatment processes, desalination processes that are challenges to this region, and we believe that this technology can help us overcome these challenges. For this specific goal, we have two main offers going on to provide the software. The first offer is for academia. So if you are part of a university, a college, or a school, and you would like to get the software, you can have it at an extremely low price compared to the commercial. And usually the commercial software is sold by modules or codes. So if you would like to study molecular systems, you will probably, for example, buy a specific module from Material Studio called Gaussian. On the other hand, and for a fraction of that same price of that single code, you can access to the whole suite of modules and add-ons in Material Studio, which is a great advantage since you can tackle the same problem using different methods. For example, you could tackle the same problem using classical simulation methods and at the same time, again, quantum mechanical methods. And for this offer, we have two types of licenses. We have one that is specific for academic research that allows you to run the simulation on a limited number of CPUs if you need it. And then another is for teaching that can be used for a minimum of 30 students class. This slides only just includes the softwares packages that are under this portfolio. It includes what we discussed today: Material Studio, Cosmo Suite, TurboMol, Pipeline Pilot for the automation of your scientific research processes, and another specialized tool for therapeutic drug design and protein interaction simulation and modeling. We have another offer specifically for fundamental research institutes where you can have access to the previously mentioned software under a discount that could reach up to 60% of the commercial prices. So if you are part of a non-profit research institute where your work is publicly available, which is the criteria for this offer, please don't hesitate to contact us to know more about this offer. You never know what you could be missing without doing this the computational work. And with this, we reach to the end of this webinar. We will tackle some questions because we have few. The first one, how can we display the energy levels of each element explicitly along with the occupation of electrons after the formation of molecular bonds?
Okay, yes, so in that case, we need to do a quantum mechanical calculation, and the quantum mechanical that will solve the electron levels and give you information of, depending on the approach that we use, so it gives information both on the electron levels for the core electrons and the valence electrons, and also the non-occupied levels. So you can make a plot of those different levels. You can show them as a density of states, so you can show how they are distributed in energy. And then you can also look at individual so-called wave functions where they are located on the molecule, and that's all available in Material Studio.
Thank you. In another question, if I am simulating a welding of polymer pipes with FEA, Abacus, can I incorporate such simulation to represent changes in crystallization upon melting and solidification?
Okay, yeah, we didn't speak very much about Abacus in this presentation. So Abacus provides a finite element description of the material. And if you're doing a welding simulation, that means that you're simulating actually materials which are changing from one property to another. So, I mean, it's a material, and then you're melting it, and then it solidifies again. So it's quite a challenging simulation, and we probably would need to have another seminar on Abacus here to really go into depth with that question. So maybe LaunchTech, you could organize also a webinar on Abacus simulations.
Yeah. In order to perform Monte Carlo simulation for mixed metric membranes, what can be the hardware requirements?
Okay, hardware requirements. So in this case, a Monte Carlo simulation is quite demanding. So I would say that you would need some kind of access to a Linux cluster if you want to do a large realistic model of such a system with Monte Carlo simulations. But it doesn't need to be an extreme supercomputing. I mean, an academic Linux cluster will certainly be sufficient for such a simulation.
Mm-hmm. And one last question is there any simple, straightforward NEB method implemented in the simulation package, like in VASP and Quantum Espresso?
So was it NEB or EB?
NEB.
NEB, sorry, yeah, okay. Yes, so the nudge elastic band. So it's a method to investigate or determining the energy barrier for a reaction, or so yes, we do have methods to determine the energy barrier for chemical reactions. We have various methods. We have in DMOL, which is one of the DFT codes. We have recently implemented FlexTS, which is based on the work of the Wales group in Cambridge. So this is a very powerful method where you can also determine not just the most or the rate limiting barrier, but also intermediate barriers along the path. So it's a similar approach like the NEB, but it's extending beyond that. So we have these methodologies in DMO. There are also transition state searches in COSTEP and in the OneTEP module. So we certainly have the capabilities of determining the transition states. And in addition to that, we also have the tools to do calculating also the prefactors to get the full rate coefficient. So it's not just the transition state, but also the rate coefficients.
Thank you. Just one last question, because this question seems interesting. What about development of machine-learned interatomic potentials?
Okay, yes, so machine learning is of course a very important topic, and machine learning potentials in addition. We are working on a research level on this together with researchers, different academic researchers, first and foremost with Cambridge, because the R&D department of BIOVIA is located in Cambridge. So there's strong ties with the University of Cambridge. So we're working on this. It's not production ready yet, but it is certainly under research, so to speak.
Okay, all right. Thank you again, Dr. Johan, for this insightful session, and thanks to everyone who attended and participated in these important discussions. If you have any further inquiries, please don't hesitate to reach out to the email shown in the screen, or you can check our website to know more about the topic. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks a lot for your attention and attending this webinar.